Life can change in the blink of an eye, even in the quietest moments, in the most ordinary places. 1 second you're standing in a grocery line, minding your own business. The next you're smack in the middle of a storm you never saw coming. This story isn't just about a slap, it's about how a single act can shatter someone's world. It's about prejudice, simmering just beneath polite smiles, and the power of money, family, and relentless determination. But above all, it's about karma, a force you can't outrun, no matter how fast or far you go. This is that story. Bryant Greenwood never expected the quiet Sunday morning to turn into a flashpoint for a national debate on race, privilege, and justice. He had strolled into Brightway Grocery, a large supermarket chain well known across the United States, with his 7-year-old son, Isaiah. It was one of those errands that felt more like father and son bonding time than a chore. Isaiah riding excitedly on the shopping cart, pointing at colourful cereal boxes and asking his dad if they could get them, and Bryant rolling his eyes good-naturedly. Bryant's net worth had soared over the years because of brilliant investments and the success of his tech startup turned international conglomerate, Greenwood Innovations. Though he occasionally appeared on the cover of magazines like Forbes, he generally enjoyed blending into the crowd. He wore simple jeans, a t-shirt, and comfortable sneakers. He tried to keep his public persona understated, especially when he was with his beloved son. Today was no exception. He simply looked like any other laid-back father picking out produce and checking the backs of boxes for nutritional information. The store's air conditioning hummed gently, providing respite from the sweltering heat outside. Shoppers sauntered down the aisles, tossing items into carts, some lost in their own music or podcasts, others murmuring into cell phones about dinner plans. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted from the bakery section, mingling with the sharp tang of floor cleaner. Over by the produce, a toddler shrieked excitedly at the pyramid of bright oranges, making an older woman chuckle. It was, by all appearances, an entirely normal day. Bryant was about to push his cart toward the dairy section when a short beep from the overhead announcements claimed his attention. A polite store employee began describing the day's deals on fresh salmon and avocados. Isaiah, who had been scrolling on Bryant's phone to look at a new toy catalog, suddenly pointed at a bright sign for a limited edition action figure in the toy aisle. "Dad, can we check that out?" Isaiah asked, voice filled with that pure, childlike excitement. "Sure, buddy," Bryant replied, nodding, "but just a quick peek, okay?" With that, they steered the cart toward the toys section. It was a short walk, but enough to take them past a few more aisles lined with snacks, cereals, and cleaning supplies. The store was moderately busy, parents with restless children, single individuals grabbing quick items for dinner, and older couples debating which brand of pasta to buy. Nothing felt off yet. Bryant, well acquainted with the subtle microaggressions that sometimes tailed a successful black man, felt none of those usual tension signals. He and Isaiah talked easily, discussing the upcoming school year and possible summer vacation spots. For Bryant, the day was so typical that it bordered on blissful. He couldn't possibly imagine the storm that was about to break over their heads in just a few short minutes. Bryant wasn't just a billionaire, he was a visionary. His early life wasn't gilded with luxury, but forged in resilience. Raised in a modest neighborhood in Chicago, he'd grown up watching both his parents juggle multiple jobs just to keep a roof over their heads and provide decent meals. His mother, Angela, had been a staunch believer in the power of knowledge, pressing library books into his hands every chance she got. His father, Leonard, spent long nights lecturing Bryant about perseverance, telling him that nobody owed him a single thing in life, that he had to carve out his own opportunities. When he turned 15, Bryant stumbled upon a library computer. Curiosity overtook him. What began as harmless browsing turned into an obsession with coding. By his junior year in high school, he designed a rudimentary app that allowed students to swap electronic notes in class without detection. Though definitely an ethical grey area, it showcased his knack for problem solving. Eventually, that small spark lit a much larger fire. With scholarships and part-time jobs, Bryant pursued a computer science degree at Stanford University. It wasn't long before he was immersed in Silicon Valley culture, absorbing knowledge, forging connections, and designing his own software solutions. After graduating, Bryant developed a revolutionary data encryption system that caught the attention of major tech companies. With the support of a small group of believers, he launched Greenwood Innovations, a company built on the premise that ethical technology could transform lives. Their flagship project was a cybersecurity platform that integrated advanced AI for real-time threat detection. Investors flocked, the IPO soared. Over the next decade, Greenwood Innovations expanded into logistics, healthcare tech, and sustainable energy solutions. Throughout his climb, he had one major personal anchor, his son, Isaiah. Bryant had married young, but the relationship ended amicably when both parties realized they wanted different things in life. His ex-wife, Talia, was a talented artist who traveled the world for her exhibits. She and Bryant maintained a healthy co-parenting relationship, Isaiah splitting time between them in a way that fostered mutual love and understanding. Isaiah, in many ways, was Bryant's driving force. Every product launch, every new market venture, every philanthropic initiative, Bryant did it to secure a brighter future for the next generation, starting with his own child. He wanted Isaiah to know that success was not merely about wealth, but about character and positive impact. It was why he'd always try to shield Isaiah from undue attention. The boy had no need to grow up in a high-pressure celebrity environment. Instead, Bryant wanted Isaiah to have the freedom of a normal childhood, riding bikes, going to summer camp, playing with friends, an unburdened childhood he himself never quite had. So, that Sunday at Brightway Grocery was typical in another sense. It was a precious moment for father and son, far removed from corporate boardrooms and philanthropic galas. Just a normal dad and his kid buying groceries. And that was exactly how Bryant liked it. Isaiah was 7, and like many 7-year-olds, his world was filled with wonder and curiosity. Everything was an adventure to him. Even something as mundane as grocery shopping with Dad felt exciting. He loved how the store was divided into sections: fruits here, toys there, snacks in another aisle. He would sometimes imagine them as different zones in a video game, each offering its own treasure or quest. From the moment they entered, Isaiah had been on a covert mission to spot that limited edition action figure he'd seen advertised on YouTube. He'd watched unboxing videos and read short reviews, or at least looked at the pictures and star ratings. The figure was part of a collectible series based on a popular superhero team. While he had several action figures at home, this one was special. It had glow-in-the-dark features and an exclusive shield accessory. In his young mind, it was nothing short of the Holy Grail. When he pointed out the toy's advertisement to his dad, he did so with childlike excitement, but also with a cautious note. He knew his father wasn't a pushover. If he wanted something, Isaiah had learned to present a good reason, or at least a decent show of gratitude. Bryant wasn't strict, but he was very intentional. There was always a lesson or principle in everything he allowed. "Dad, it's not just any action figure," he pleaded, eyes sparkling. "It's the only one that glows in the dark, and it has a special shield that can block lasers." Bryant chuckled in response, nodding. "We'll look. If it's not there, or if it's too pricey, we'll leave it for another time." Isaiah accepted that condition. He knew the routine. If they didn't find it, or if his dad didn't think it was worth the investment, he'd still get something else small, maybe a comic book or a pack of trading cards. He was happy just to be spending time with his dad, stepping outside the normal routine of private tutoring lessons and sports practices. Grocery shopping was a break from structure, a place where he could marvel at a giant stack of soda cans or wide assortments of candy. As they moved through the aisles, Isaiah noticed people occasionally glance at them. Some recognized Bryant from news segments or financial magazines, but they remained polite from afar, perhaps not entirely sure it was him. Or maybe they were used to seeing local celebrities in this upscale neighborhood. Regardless, Isaiah didn't pay them much mind. He was used to side eyes and hushed tones wherever they went. His dad was kind of a big deal, and that was that. What he wasn't used to and what he had never prepared for was outright hostility from a complete stranger. For him, life was still an expansive bubble of security, but that bubble was about to burst in the middle of the toy aisle, leaving him both confused and deeply hurt. Little did he know how sharply fate would twist, all in one unexpected moment. Bryant and Isaiah finally reached the toy aisle. It was more vibrant than all the others, full of colors, cartoon characters, and plastic wonders. Boxes of board games towered on one side, and stuffed animals lined the opposite shelf, while an entire subsection was dedicated to the trending superhero brand that Isaiah adored. The place smelled faintly of that distinct new plastic scent. Typically, on a Saturday or Sunday, you might see 2 or 3 kids rummaging through the boxes, squealing over dolls or car sets. Today was no different. Isaiah let go of the cart and darted toward a tall display stand. "Dad, I think it's here," he exclaimed. Bryant followed, stepping around a father and daughter who were comparing a pair of puzzle boxes. As Isaiah scanned the shelves, Bryant glanced to his right and noticed a woman glaring at them. She appeared to be in her late 30s or early 40s, with carefully styled blonde hair and wearing designer sunglasses perched atop her head. Her purse had a recognizable Gucci logo, and she wore a fitted white blouse with sleek beige pants. She looked every bit the fashionable shopper, someone who likely prided herself on her curated appearance. Bryant couldn't place her glare at first. Maybe she was just annoyed at how Isaiah had dashed into the aisle. Children could be energetic, but her eyes lingered a bit too long, and her expression was sour. Bryant gave her a polite nod, hoping to diffuse whatever tension was causing her hostility. She made a huffing sound, glanced away as if she'd smelled something unpleasant, and then took a step closer to the shelf where Isaiah stood. Isaiah, oblivious, was already kneeling down to check the lower shelf. He let out a small gasp of triumph as his hand closed around the limited edition figure. "Dad, I found it." Bryant's face softened into a smile. "Nice job, buddy. Let me see it," he said, stepping forward to examine the box. That's when the woman suddenly loomed over Isaiah, glancing disapprovingly at the toy in his hand. She frowned, as if offended by the sight of them. Isaiah instinctively pressed the box closer to his chest, uncertain why this stranger was hovering. Bryant took a protective step forward, placing an arm around his son. "Excuse me," she said in a curt voice. She didn't even look at Bryant, but directed her attention to Isaiah, who was practically cowering now. "I was planning to buy that for my nephew." Isaiah blinked in confusion. "But I got it first," he replied softly. Bryant raised his eyebrows. The store had more than one copy of that figure. As far as he could see, there might be another on a higher shelf or perhaps in another section. Plus, there was no rule stating that Isaiah's interest was invalidated if someone else wanted the same toy. "Ma'am," Bryant began, keeping his tone polite, "I'm sure they have more. My son has been looking forward to this toy." She cut him off abruptly. "And who do you think you are?" she snapped. "Do you even know how expensive that figure is? It's a collector's item." Isaiah's face fell. He clutched the figure tightly, uncertain if he was allowed to speak. Sensing his boy's unease, Bryant gently patted Isaiah's shoulder. "I'm aware," Bryant said, mustering calm. "He's been saving up for it. That's when she set her jaw, turned her attention fully to Isaiah, and hissed, "You don't deserve that. Hand it over." The tension in the aisle thickened. A few onlookers, other parents, a store employee had begun to sense trouble, but no one stepped in just yet. Bryant's posture stiffened, protective instincts flaring. He was about to insist that they pay for the toy and walk away when the woman's hand shot out unexpectedly. And that's when it happened. The slap heard round the grocery store. Isaiah didn't see it coming. 1 minute he was hugging the toy to his chest. The next, a sharp sting exploded across his cheek. The sound was jarringly loud, like a clap of thunder out of a clear sky. For a split second, Isaiah's eyes widened with shock. He dropped the toy and it clattered onto the floor. The entire aisle seemed to freeze in that moment, as if time itself had been slapped still. Bryant felt fury surge through him, fast and hot. Seeing his child assaulted like that tore through any restraint he normally prided himself on. His vision narrowed, breath shallow. He knelt by Isaiah first, cupping his son's tearful face, and examined the red imprint on his cheek. "Isaiah," he said softly, voice tight with concern. "Are you okay?" Tears trembled on Isaiah's lashes as he nodded, stunned more than hurt. That stunned look in his child's eyes ignited an inferno in Bryant's chest. He rose to face the woman who had taken a step back, apparently realizing what she'd done. A swirl of hushes and gasps spread through the aisle. A couple of parents rushed forward. One mother pulled her own child protectively behind her, casting the white woman a horrified look. A store employee, wearing a Brightway grocery vest, hurried over, speaking into his walkie-talkie for managerial support. Bryant's voice, though quiet, was thick with barely contained rage. "Why would you do that? He's just a little boy." The woman's eyes darted around, panic creeping into her expression. Then, as if struggling to reassert her superiority, she jutted her chin out. "He grabbed the toy from me first," she insisted, her voice trembling but still arrogant. "He wouldn't let it go, and he was being disrespectful." Bryant exhaled slowly, fists clenched. "He's 7. She folded her arms defensively, eyes burning with a mixture of fear and anger. "I don't care if he's 7 or 17. He can't just act entitled, taking things that aren't meant for him." Entitled. The word rang in Bryant's head, echoing the stereotypes and insinuations he'd heard whispered in corners all his life. But this wasn't about him, it was about Isaiah. The store manager, a middle-aged man named Greg, arrived, his face taut with concern. "What's going on here?" Greg asked, looking back and forth between the woman and Bryant. Bryant took a calming breath, placing a comforting hand on Isaiah's shoulder. "This woman just slapped my son, for no reason. We need security, and we need the police here." The woman looked appalled at the mention of police. "There's no need for that. It was a reflex, and he was being rude." Before Greg could respond, a few witnesses chimed in. They'd seen the whole thing, how the woman had slapped the boy out of nowhere. Their accounts made it clear Isaiah had done nothing to deserve that violence. The woman paled. Her excuses were crumbling under the weight of multiple testimonies. As if on cue, store security arrived and gently asked everyone to keep calm until the authorities arrived. What the woman didn't realize, at least not yet, was that the well-built man standing next to the boy she'd struck wasn't just any father. He was Bryant Greenwood, billionaire tech mogul and philanthropist, whose resources, influence, and sheer determination to protect his son would prove immeasurable. And if she thought she could bully a young black child with impunity, she was about to learn a lesson in accountability that would change her life forever. The store security team escorted everyone, Bryant, Isaiah, and the woman, toward a small administrative office near the back of the store. The narrow hallway leading there was lit by flickering fluorescent lights, echoing with the hum of refrigeration units. Shoppers gawked as the group passed. Rumors zipped through the store like wildfire. Someone had managed to capture the slap on their phone, while others had only heard the commotion. A sense of outrage filled the air like static electricity. Isaiah, holding tightly to his father's hand, was trembling. Bryant knelt down before entering the office, trying to maintain a gentle tone for his son's sake. "We're going to be okay," he said, brushing a tear from the boy's cheek. "I need you to be brave for just a little longer." Isaiah nodded, still in shock. Bryant squeezed his small hand reassuringly, then turned a steel-eyed gaze on the security officers. "Do you have a first aid kit or ice packs? I'd like to soothe his cheek." One of the officers, a man named Josiah, nodded immediately. "Yes, sir. I'll grab some ice." Once inside the cramped administrative office, really just a space with a couple of desks and a computer, the tension was palpable. The white woman, who introduced herself as Heather Jones, kept insisting it was all a misunderstanding. Her voice took on a near hysterical pitch. "He was being rude. He snatched the toy. I just reacted." "Ma'am, that does not justify assault, Greg," the store manager said firmly. He'd already pulled up surveillance footage that partially caught the incident from a camera mounted in the aisle. It wasn't a perfect angle, but it was enough to show Heather leaning in to slap Isaiah, who clearly wasn't grabbing anything from her hands. Bryant, standing protectively behind Isaiah, had his arms crossed. "I'm pressing charges," he stated quietly, leaving no room for debate. "No one puts their hands on my child." Heather's face paled further. She looked at Bryant for the first time, truly looked at him. A flicker of recognition seemed to cross her features, as if she might have seen him somewhere before. Her composure faltered. "There's no need for police involvement," she stammered. "Look, I just lost control. Outside, sirens signaled the arrival of law enforcement. Two uniformed officers from the local precinct stepped in. Their presence instantly reconfigured the dynamic in the small room. One officer, a woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, took statements, while her partner, a broad-shouldered man, verified details with Greg and the store's security guard. As each witness spoke, Heather's excuses melted away. Tears began to trickle down her cheeks, turning into a desperate plea. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice quivering. "I didn't mean to hurt him. You just wanted to assert control," Bryant cut in, voice level but loaded with anger. "You saw a black child holding something you felt he shouldn't have, and you attacked him." Heather's eyes flashed. Maybe she wanted to defend herself, but the video evidence and multiple witnesses left her at a disadvantage. The reality was inescapable. She had slapped a child. The female officer closed her notepad and looked at Heather. "Miss Jones, please stand up. I need you to place your hands behind your back." That was the moment Heather realized she was about to be arrested for assault. She burst into tears, shaking her head in disbelief. But I'm a good person." "I didn't mean," with Isaiah pressed into his father's side. Bryant watched as the officer gently but firmly cuffed Heather. An initial wave of satisfaction welled inside him, tempered by the heartbreak of seeing his son's tear-streaked face. Heather was led out of the office, presumably off to the station for processing. Meanwhile, the second officer turned to Bryant, a note of respect in his voice. "Mr. Greenwood," the officer said quietly, "we're sorry this happened to your boy. We're going to file a thorough report and advise you on next steps." Bryant nodded. He pulled Isaiah closer, feeling the steady, comforting warmth of his son's presence. "Thank you, officer." In that moment, he resolved that no matter how high the cost, he would see justice done. A line had been crossed, his child's safety and dignity had been violated. There would be no sweeping this under the rug. Not now, not ever. Heather Jones paced anxiously in the holding cell of the local police station, still dressed in her chic blouse and designer pants, which now looked oddly out of place. She could practically feel the eyes of the other detainees on her, though most were too concerned with their own problems to pay her much mind. Her thoughts swirled in a chaotic loop. How did I get here? How could this have happened to me? Heather had grown up in a middle-class suburban enclave. Her parents were civil servants, her father a local firefighter, and her mother a teacher. She'd often considered herself woke and open-minded, enjoying the idea that she was better than overtly prejudiced people she'd seen on TV or read about in social media horror stories. She'd gone to a fairly diverse university, had acquaintances of different ethnic backgrounds, and attended a few multicultural events over the years. Yet, somehow, a snap decision born of frustration, entitlement, or something uglier had led her to strike a young black boy in a crowded grocery store. Now she was in handcuffs, locked behind bars. It was as if all her illusions about herself were cracking under the weight of that single slap. Sitting down on the cold bench, Heather tried to process her own impulses. She told herself she wasn't a racist. She had never joined extremist groups, never posted hateful content online, never used racial slurs, at least not out loud. Sure, she'd grown irritated seeing certain people in what she considered her spaces, but that was normal, right? Everyone did that, didn't they? But this had gone too far. Shivers of apprehension rippled through her. She'd assaulted a child whose father just happened to be a billionaire. The father's face had begun to ring bells in her memory, especially after he stated his full name, Bryant Greenwood. The man on the cover of Forbes, celebrated in business articles for his tech conglomerate, Greenwood Innovations. The philanthropic entrepreneur who had funded numerous scholarships for disadvantaged youth. In one fell swoop, she'd managed to strike the kid of not only an influential figure, but one with the financial means to make her life a living nightmare. She feared the scandal. Already she could envision the news cycles. Woman slaps billionaire's son in shocking incident. The court of public opinion would eat her alive, and the worst part was she knew she deserved it. She replayed the moment in her head, the child holding a toy, her anger at not getting her way, the humiliating realization that she couldn't bully him to submission. She'd let that frustration turn into violence. Now, behind bars, she was forced to confront an unsightly truth. Deep down, she'd believed she was more entitled to that toy, more entitled to respect from a child she perceived as less than all because of her own prejudices. She didn't think she was racist, yet the evidence was undeniable. She could rationalize it however she liked, but the reality was that she'd allowed her biases and sense of superiority to explode into physical violence. As she heard footsteps approaching, likely an officer coming to inform her of her bail or additional charges, Heather's stomach twisted. She realized that this nightmare had only just begun. She'd wanted to maintain an aura of sophistication and control. Instead, she found herself on the brink of losing everything. The incident at Brightway Grocery didn't remain a private affair for long. Within hours, short clips and pictures flooded social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. One of the bystanders had captured the moment of the slap and posted it with a fiery caption, "Random Karen slaps child of a black billionaire. Assault #racism, #justice for Isaiah." It was clickbait gold, and the internet devoured it. Comment threads lit up like fireworks, filled with outrage, condemnation, and heated debates about race, privilege, and power. Some voices, as always, tried to spin the narrative. We don't know the whole story, or kids can be bratty, but violence is never the answer. Others turned it into a soapbox on systemic racism, pointing out how quickly some individuals assume authority over black spaces and bodies. Still others expressed horror at the idea of a child being slapped in public, regardless of the father's social status. Local news outlets caught wind of the story next. Within a day, camera crews were parked outside Brightway Grocery, interviewing employees and witnesses. The store manager, Greg, gave a brief statement, expressing how appalled they were and that the company had a zero-tolerance policy for violence on store premises. They promised full cooperation with the investigation. One major news channel even managed to track down a few customers who had been present during the incident, all of whom corroborated the viral video. But then came the bigger media wave. National networks like CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News started featuring short segments about the assault. They pulled images of Bryant Greenwood from his Forbes covers and philanthropic events, discussing his background as a self-made billionaire who'd pulled himself up by his bootstraps. Pundits debated how race and wealth intersected in this scenario. Would the story be as big if he wasn't a billionaire? What if the father hadn't had the financial resources or social visibility? Would justice have been served as swiftly? Bryant himself maintained a low profile through his PR team, refusing any direct interviews and simply issuing a statement that read, "My first priority is the well-being of my son. We are cooperating with the proper authorities to ensure that justice is served. We ask for privacy and understanding during this difficult time." But the silence only fueled speculation. Some people insisted Bryant should speak out more forcefully and use his platform to spark a larger conversation about the everyday aggression faced by black people in America. Others argued he had every right to shield his child from the public eye. Meanwhile, Heather Jones became a trending name on social media. Internet sleuths dug up her LinkedIn profile, found pictures of her at various social events, and compiled everything into a not-so-flattering collage. Some users published her home address and personal phone number, prompting discussions about doxing and internet vigilantism. She had seemingly vanished from her online profiles, deleting or deactivating accounts in a matter of days. For Isaiah, the media frenzy felt like a second assault. His name and face were plastered everywhere, turning him into a poster child for innocent victims of racial violence. Kids at his school recognized him on TV. Even though the school year was still weeks away from starting, he'd already received messages from classmates. "Saw you on the news. Are you okay?" This offered some comfort, but it also made him more aware of how large the world can feel when everyone's eyes are on you. As the summer sun beat down on the city, the heat of public opinion only intensified. With each passing hour, it became clear that this story was more than just a viral clip. It was a cultural flashpoint. And at the center of it all was a father who had once just wanted to buy groceries and spend a carefree day with his son. A few days after the slap, Heather Jones managed to post bail, and her release from custody stirred fresh controversy. Within hours, she held a brief press conference against the advice of her legal counsel outside the courthouse. She insisted she was not a racist, that the media was skewing the narrative, and that she'd acted out of fear and confusion. When pressed by reporters, she wouldn't give a coherent explanation of what exactly she'd been afraid of. Her statements only fueled the anger of those following the case, who saw her as unwilling to take real accountability. A major twist came when an attorney named Charles Fields announced he'd be representing Heather pro bono. Fields was known for defending controversial figures, often weaving sensational media strategies that turned public opinion on its head. He had a track record of deflecting blame onto victims, painting them as aggressors, or complicating the narrative enough to muddy the waters. Observers braced themselves for what might come next, fearing a smear campaign against Isaiah and Bryant. Sure enough, Fields began insinuating in interviews that Isaiah might have exhibited behavioral issues or that Bryant's wealth could have emboldened his child to act out. The theory, as flimsy as it was, gained traction in certain corners of social media. The hashtag Justice for Isaiah hashtag had a counter-movement, hashtag Questions for Isaiah, where trolls and cynics demanded to see the rest of the footage or hear the other side that explained Heather's actions. Simultaneously, Greenwood Innovations saw a sudden dip in stock price. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was enough to catch the attention of Bryant's board members. Some investors worried about negative publicity spilling over into the brand's image. They urged Bryant to lay low, encouraging him to settle the issue outside of court to prevent a prolonged media circus. But Bryant refused. He would not send the message that a child's suffering was a line item to be bargained away. Behind the scenes, Bryant strategized with his own legal team. They advised him to file both civil and criminal suits for assault on a minor. The district attorney seemed eager to prosecute Heather Jones to the full extent of the law. The evidence was overwhelming, including footage that clearly showed her striking Isaiah unprovoked. However, everyone knew how these cases could drag on, especially if Heather's defense team decided to spin the narrative in outlandish ways. Another twist came in the form of an outpouring of support from the Black community and beyond. Activists, including prominent figures like the Reverend David Reynolds, known for his televised community outreach programs, publicly supported Bryant and Isaiah. A crowdfund started to build a legal defense war chest, even though Bryant didn't need the money. He chose to redirect it to a non-profit aimed at preventing child abuse. Then came an unexpected event. Harriet King, a well-known talk show host, invited Bryant and Isaiah to an exclusive sit-down interview. Bryant deliberated for days. He disliked thrusting Isaiah into the spotlight, but eventually he saw an opportunity to address the situation in a controlled environment. By telling their story, they might help other families facing similar, if less high-profile, assaults. The media began speculating about what might be revealed in that interview. Heather's team condemned the move, accusing Bryant of using the talk show as a trial by media. But for Bryant, it was a chance to break his silence, to speak directly to people who had been bombarded with half-truths and manipulated narratives. He wanted the world to see Isaiah as more than just the billionaire's kid, to see him as a real child who had been hurt and deserved justice. The day of the interview with Harriet King arrived. Bryant and Isaiah stepped onto the set of her show, which was a cozy, living room-style studio with soft lighting and tasteful decor. The audience, seated in neat rows, wore badges that read #Justice for Isaiah. Some clapped politely, others cheered, and a few simply watched with concern etched into their faces. Harriet greeted them warmly, wearing a compassionate smile and a simple navy blue dress. She invited Bryant and Isaiah to sit on a plush couch while she took a matching armchair. After a short introduction highlighting Bryant's achievements and philanthropic work, she turned her full attention to Isaiah. "How are you feeling, honey?" Harriet asked gently. Isaiah glanced at his father, who nodded encouragement. "I'm okay," he said in a small voice. "My cheek hurt for a day or two, but it's better now." Harriet gave him a sympathetic look. "That's good to hear. Do you remember how you felt in that moment? When that woman hit you?" The boy swallowed, his eyes flicking downward. "I felt scared," he said, "and confused. I didn't know why she was so angry. I just wanted to get the toy." Harriet nodded, compassion radiating from her. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that." No child should ever experience violence for any reason. She turned to Bryant. "Mr. Greenwood, I know you initially hesitated to do interviews, but here you are. What made you change your mind?" Bryant inhaled, finding his voice. "At first, I was worried about Isaiah's privacy. But we realize this isn't just about one child in a grocery store. It's about a pattern, subtle and overt aggression that Black people, especially Black children, face. It's about accountability for violent outbursts triggered by entitlement or prejudice. And if talking about it publicly can spark even a small change, then we have a responsibility to do that." The audience murmured in agreement. Harriet leaned forward. "That's powerful. Can you tell us more about your background and why this issue feels so personal for you?" Brian spoke about his upbringing on Chicago's South Side, the challenges he'd faced, the microaggressions he'd endured as he rose through the ranks in Silicon Valley. I've had board members act shocked that someone who looks like me could lead a major tech firm. I've had subtle comments implying I must have had special assistance to achieve what I have. This incident with my son is an extension of that ignorance, but it's also an act of violence that can't be ignored. One of Harriet's producers signaled a commercial break. When they resumed, Harriet shifted gears, asking Isaiah what he wanted to be when he grew up. The boy brightened a bit, describing his dreams of becoming an astronaut or an inventor. The conversation brought laughter and relief, offering a gentle reminder that Isaiah was still a child with big dreams and boundless potential. By the end of the interview, even viewers at home could feel the sincerity and pain behind every word. The show closed with Harriet's final question: "Bryant, what do you hope to see happen legally and socially after this incident?" Bryant didn't mince words. "I want Heather Jones to face the legal consequences. But more than that, I hope this sparks conversations about why these incidents happen at all. Because it wasn't just about a toy or just about my son. It's about seeing children as children, not as threats. It's about addressing racial biases we carry, sometimes without even knowing. And it's about standing up for justice without fail." Harriet thanked them, eyes glistening, and called for a round of applause. The camera panned across Isaiah's small, resilient smile. The moment was etched into public consciousness, a father and son, unwavering in their pursuit of justice and healing. A month later, Heather Jones arrived at the county courthouse to face assault charges. The press presence was overwhelming. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing, microphones bobbing like buoys in a stormy sea. Heather wore a conservative black suit and kept her eyes down, escorted by her lawyer, Charles Fields, who looked eager to perform in front of the media. Bryant and Isaiah also arrived, supported by family, friends, and a small entourage of legal experts. Though Isaiah wasn't required to testify that day, Bryant wanted him to understand how the justice system worked and to see that they weren't afraid of it. The tension in the corridors was palpable. Outside, protesters gathered, holding signs like "Protect our children" and "No more racial violence." Security was tight, scanning each person who entered. The hearing began with opening statements. The prosecutor laid out the facts: Heather's unprovoked slap, multiple eyewitness accounts, and video evidence. Even if the victim had been an adult, the prosecutor argued, this was a straightforward assault case. But the fact that the victim was a child made the incident more egregious. The law, the prosecutor emphasized, would not look kindly upon an adult striking a minor. Charles Fields launched into his defense. He tried to paint the situation as a misunderstanding, stoking fear by describing Isaiah as rambunctious and physically aggressive with the toy. He insinuated that Heather reacted out of maternal instinct, mistaking Isaiah for a threat to her own safety. A ripple of disbelieving anger spread through the courtroom on the prosecution's side. Bryant listened, his jaw clenched, as Heather was portrayed as a hapless victim who had momentarily felt her space was invaded. He glanced at Isaiah, who clutched his father's hand, brows furrowed in confusion at the lawyer's twisting of the facts. But Bryant's legal team had prepared for such tactics. They countered with the store's surveillance footage and an unassailable lineup of eyewitness testimonies. Each described the same scenario. Heather marched up to Isaiah, demanded the toy, and lashed out when he didn't comply. During cross-examination, the prosecutor zeroed in on Heather's initial statements to the store manager and police officers, statements about Isaiah not deserving the toy. The prosecutor asked pointedly, "Why did you believe that? On what basis did you decide he didn't deserve it?" Heather squirmed, unable to offer a coherent reply. Fields tried to object, but the judge allowed the line of questioning, seeing it as relevant to motive. Outside the courthouse, the press clamored for interviews. Some asked if Bryant was willing to accept an apology instead of pressing charges. He simply responded, "We're letting the legal process take its course. My son deserves that." He refused to engage any further, his expression stoic yet resolute. By the end of the hearing, the judge deemed there was enough evidence to proceed to trial, setting a date a few weeks later. Heather's face drained of color when the judge handed down that decision. She left the courtroom amidst a barrage of camera flashes, her lawyer tight-lipped. For the first time, it seemed real to everyone, Heather's supporters, her critics, the legal teams. A final reckoning was approaching. The question wasn't just about whether Heather would be found guilty. It was also about how society would interpret and react to a case steeped in issues of race, class, and child safety. One thing, however, was certain: the outcome would leave lasting ripples far beyond the walls of that courtroom. As the trial date approached, Heather's life imploded. She lost her job at a high-end interior design firm after clients began threatening to pull their business if she remained on staff. Her fiancé, who had initially tried to stand by her, decided he couldn't handle the fallout. He packed his bags and left, citing irreconcilable differences and a fundamental moral gap he hadn't recognized until now. Social ostracization followed. Neighbors once friendly now avoided eye contact or whispered behind her back. Her attempts at everyday errands were met with cold stares and occasional jeering. Online, she became a meme, her slap reenacted in comedic parodies that garnered millions of views. Karen Attack 2.0, some called it, referencing a trend of women caught on camera displaying entitled or racist behavior. Heather sank deeper into depression, alternating between bitterness and self-loathing. She told herself that one mistake shouldn't define her entire life, but she couldn't escape the reality that this wasn't just a mistake. It was a snapshot of deeply ingrained prejudice, one which had manifested in violence against a child. Meanwhile, Bryant moved forward, balancing fatherhood with the demands of overseeing Greenwood Innovations. He enrolled Isaiah in therapy sessions to help him process the trauma. The boy had become more withdrawn, sometimes waking from nightmares where a faceless figure lunged at him. Yet, with each passing week, Bryant could see flashes of Isaiah's old optimism returning, helped along by loving family, a strong support network, and meaningful conversations about how to handle life's cruelties. When the trial finally began, reporters filled the courtroom, broadcasting every testimony. Expert witnesses attested that Isaiah showed signs of trauma. Store employees testified that Heather had seemed combative well before the slap. The surveillance footage, played repeatedly, left little ambiguity about her guilt. Even Fields' skilled attempts to muddy the narrative couldn't overcome the stark reality of the video. Finally, the day came for the verdict. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning with a unanimous decision. Heather Jones was found guilty of felony assault on a minor. The judge sentenced her to 6 months in county jail and 3 years probation, alongside mandatory anger management classes and community service. It wasn't the maximum sentence possible, but it was a clear statement that her actions had serious consequences. A wave of relief washed over Bryant. He pulled Isaiah into a hug, whispering that justice had been served. Heather stood as the bailiff approached, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. She glanced at Bryant, as though searching for some sign of mercy, but found only a resolute gaze. Whatever sympathy he might have once had was overshadowed by the memory of Isaiah's tear-streaked face on that fateful day in the toy aisle. With the clang of a gavel, the judge adjourned the proceedings. Heather was led away, the echoes of footsteps clacking on the tile floor. The cameras followed, capturing every second of her final walk as a free woman. Outside, a crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and solemn nods. People congratulated Bryant, praising his courage. Some patted Isaiah's shoulder, offering words of support. Yet through it all, Bryant knew that while the verdict provided closure for this singular incident, the broader battle against prejudice was far from over. For every Heather Jones held accountable, countless acts of discrimination went unseen. But this victory, this one victory, mattered. It sent a message that no one was above the law, that striking a child was never acceptable, and that deep-seated racism could not be hidden behind luxury brands or social standing. Several months passed. The media's attention waned, shifting to other stories as it always did, but the aftermath lingered in the Greenwood household. Isaiah, back in school, carried himself with a new sense of caution. He'd grown more thoughtful, sometimes asking questions about why people act in hateful ways. Bryant did his best to provide honest answers without dousing his son's innocence altogether. Greenwood innovations rebounded, as many believed the negative press actually showcased Bryant's integrity. Shareholders respected that he refused to back down from seeking justice. The philanthropic branch of his company started a new initiative called Isaiah's Foundation, aimed at funding community centers that provided after-school activities and emotional support for children who'd experienced trauma. Donations poured in, far exceeding initial projections. For Heather Jones, life had changed irrevocably. After serving her 6-month sentence, she faced an uphill climb re-entering society. Job interviews were scarce. Her name was synonymous with the grocery store assault. People recognized her, crossing the street or whispering under their breath. She had no choice but to move to a different city, trying to build a life from the ashes of her old one. Those months behind bars forced her to confront her biases. She attended mandatory counseling sessions, where she learned about the systemic forces at play in her actions, about empathy, and about controlling anger. Whether this introspection would lead to lasting change remained uncertain, but she had nowhere to go but forward. As for Bryant, he refused to let bitterness consume him. The incident, while heartbreaking, became a catalyst for deeper dialogues with Isaiah, friends, and community leaders. He recognized that as a prominent black billionaire, he had an even greater responsibility to champion social justice. So he expanded his philanthropic reach, funding programs that tackled racial bias from an early age. And whenever he found himself remembering the day at the grocery store, he held Isaiah close, grateful that the physical harm wasn't worse, and determined to mend whatever emotional harm lingered. On a sunny Saturday morning, Bryant and Isaiah visited that same Brightway grocery store. They walked the aisles, picking out fresh fruit, bread, cereal. Isaiah hesitated as they passed the toy section but didn't look away. His father placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We don't have to go down there if you don't want to, bud," Bryant said quietly. Isaiah shook his head. "It's okay, Dad. Let's go." And so they did. Nothing dramatic happened this time. They simply looked at the toys. Isaiah pointed out a new action figure, not the same line that had caused the chaos, but a bright red superhero from a different series. Bryant smiled, placing it into the cart without hesitation. Life had regained its normal rhythm, even if the scars still glowed faintly beneath the surface. But that was life, Bryant realized, beautiful and bruised, hopeful and haunted all at once. The important thing was to keep moving forward, armed with the knowledge that justice was not guaranteed, it was fought for, step by determined step. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. In a single moment, one impulsive act changed multiple lives, forever exposing hidden biases, reuniting a community in outrage and compassion, and proving the resilience of a young boy who refused to let fear define him. This story reminds us that vigilance against prejudice isn't just an abstract ideal, but a daily commitment we all share. We saw karma deliver a decisive blow, ensuring that one woman's entitlement found its match in a father's unwavering love and the power of justice. If you found value in this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support enables us to continue telling stories that spark conversations and bring important issues to the forefront. Together, let's stand against any form of hate and help create a world where every child can feel safe. Thank you for watching.